who did it. Why? In the theater, there are neutral and qualified people who are making investigation. On the other theater, they are trying to say who did penetrate in the closed circle of Wissam al-Hassan and gave that concrete information about his movement, etc., etc. I think they will arrive to know. But the question is, if they know, are they ready to say who did it? This is the problem. Maybe we will have a reason, like they call it, raison d'etat, for not saying. Anyway, now we are talking about problems and security in Lebanon. Yesterday, from yesterday until today, the Lebanese army was a target for snipers and for insurgents who tried to kill members of the army. Why? Who are trying to disturb the security in Lebanon? Yesterday, who tried to attack the headquarters of the government, which is a dead line or a red line. Like, you know, in 2007, Hezbollah was there for 1 year near the Sarai, or the headquarters of the government. They didn't have any try to attack because somebody told them, be careful, it's a red line. The same for President Lahoud in the palace in Babda in 2005. Anyway, what happened yesterday is very dangerous, and I think the Lebanese army made it clear today to tell everyone, politicians and people and insurgents on all sides, that the army will not tolerate against any aggression for public sector or governmental sector.
All right, so the army
was telling everyone, not only the government or not only the insurgent, the political leader in Lebanon who pretend to care about security in Lebanon, they must support the army and cover the movement of the army. The army is not prepared to solve political problems. The army, his job and his task and his duty to solve security problem, not political problem.
All right. The army with a tough. We're going to illustrate what you're saying, Hicham Jaber. The army with a tough act a tough card to play right now, not just in Beirut, the northern city of Tripoli, where 4 people were killed at least this Monday. We have reports of a woman and 3 children, casualties of fighting between Sunnis and Alawites, the minority Shiite sect of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
Gunshots heard over the northern Lebanese city of Tripoli as supporters and opponents of neighbouring Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime opened fire. Gunmen from the Sunni Muslim region of Bab al-Tabani, who are opposed to the regime, clashed with rival district Jabal Mohsen, whose Alawite Muslim residents support it.
Look at the cars. They are firing on the bridge. We are here to respond to gunfire.
On Sunday night, violence broke out in the city. Gunmen hurled rocket-propelled grenades and houses were set on fire.
They opened the battle on us yesterday. They started to fire and throw bombs at us, and until now we haven't retaliated or done anything. Look at the smoke and how they are burning our houses.
The attacks broke out after the funeral of Lebanon's former internal intelligence chief, Wissam al-Hassan, who was killed in a car bomb on Friday. Opponents of the Syrian regime set up tents outside the house of Lebanon's Prime Minister Najib Mikati. They accuse him and pro-Syria elements of his government of playing a role in the recent assassination of al-Hassan. He led an investigation which implicated the Syrian regime and Hezbollah in the assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Hariri. Lebanese soldiers have been deployed throughout Tripoli in an attempt to restore calm.
Tripoli, very close to the Syrian border, Pierre ROUSSELIN. Your thoughts when you see that report?
Well, it shows how tense the situation is and how easy it is for anybody to transfer the conflict that is going on in Syria to Lebanon. After all, it's the same communities that are living close by, and it's very easy to inflame the situation. I think that's the main worry. And whoever did the assassination on Friday This is the main worry of the international community, and for the Lebanese also it is to maintain stability.
All right, so the looking over the border, by the way, is also the French foreign minister, Laurent Fabius, who over the weekend looked past Hezbollah at its benefactor, the Syrian regime.
Hezbollah is in the Lebanese government, but until now, we hadn't seen much of them with regards to the conflict in Syria. But for several days, and this has been acknowledged by Hezbollah, some of their militants have been taking part in this conflict. A drone was sent over Israel by the group. So it seems that Hezbollah, and so Iran as well, wish to make their presence felt more explicitly. And this is something that we cannot agree with.
Jonathan Spire, if with everything that's happening across the border in Syria, is it really in Hezbollah's interest to carry out proxy work, as Laurent Fabius seems to imply, on behalf of Damascus?
First of all, the French official is correct, Fabius is correct, in the sense that there's already evidence, very strong evidence to suggest that this is happening. A very senior Hezbollah officer, Ali Hussein al-Nassif, killed 3 weeks ago, I think, in Syria, and his funeral then held with great pomp and circumstance by the organization back in Lebanon. So it is happening. As to why it's happening, whether it's in Hezbollah's or why it's in Hezbollah's interest, it is in Hezbollah's interest because Hezbollah is part of a larger regional alliance. It is, after all, a creation and a client of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And it is a cardinal interest from Tehran's point of view to keep Bashar al-Assad in place. And that is because it is a strategic goal of Iran to have a contiguous line of pro-Iranian states stretching from Iran to the Mediterranean Sea, meaning Iran, Iraq, Assad Syria, and Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon. If one of those goes down, that's the end of that central strategic goal for Tehran. And that's the reason why Iran has really been pulling out all possible options and throwing everything it has, to the tune of around $5 billion, we're told, the presence of Revolutionary Guard officers and fighters also on the ground in Syria, and also, of course, we are now coming to see and to understand the presence of Hezbollah militants and officers across the border too. Very much visibly so in the Homs area, by the way, over the last week or so, and not denied by Hezbollah leader Nasrallah, but we also think much further afield. So once we understand that context and logic, then it becomes much more easy to understand just why Hezbollah might well also, it's perfectly possible, might well also have involved itself, been willing to involve itself in the kind of killing which just took place in Lebanon against Wissam al-Hassan.
Javier Espinosa, you've been on both sides of the border. What evidence have you seen of Hezbollah policies perhaps shifting?
Well, I didn't see any kind of proof that say that Hezbollah was involved in the fighting, but it's true that Nasrallah recognized some days ago that there are people from Hezbollah. He didn't say the movement as such. People from Hezbollah who are in the border, living in the border, are fighting because he said they are being attacked by the FSA. But what is clear is that both sides are being dragged in the crisis. I mean, one side is supporting clearly the FSA. I mean, if you go to Tripoli, it's very easy to see all these FSA guys there just coming back from the war, getting rest and getting supplies and going back with the support of one side. And if you go to the Bekaa, you speak with the people and they tell you the same. Even there are some Shias who are voluntary to go to fight on the side of their people there. So it's a kind of sectarian war developing in this area. And this is going to engulf both countries because the sectarian factor cannot be controlled.
Inevitable that it descends into that. We can call up a map of the current makeup of Lebanon's parliament, and it sort of mirrors the complicated patchwork that is that country. Hezbollah itself, has 13 seats, I believe, on its own, but there you see some of its other partners in what's known as the March 8th coalition, 68 seats in all, 60 seats for the opposition March 14th alliance. The rules from the outside can sometimes appear a bit arcane, Hicham Jaber, in terms of how you vote in parliament, how you you make up these borders, but there is always this specter of what's happening in Syria. Do you agree with Javier Espinosa that the longer the conflict drags on in Syria, the more hardline Sunnis, hardline Shiites will be prone to fighting each other in places like Tripoli?
Tripoli is a special case. Is very sensitive area, was always affected by the Syrian situation, even before the events in Syria. And when the Palestinians were there, Abu Ammar, etc., they used to have fighting between pro-Syrian and against Syrian. Now the situation also is clear in Tripoli. There are two sides fighting each other. The army is trying to ensure a ceasefire, like it did and succeed 3 months ago. The situation in Beirut is very different. There are no sides who are fighting. Insurgents or gunmen are shooting the army in Tariq Jdidi, Asas, etc., etc. We did discover today that among them Syrians and Palestinians. I don't think it's convenient to the Lebanese people to find strangers, gunmen, fighting the Lebanese armed forces. For this reason, the army came with this statement today and made it clear to everyone. And on the other hand, talking about Hezbollah and the Shia in Syria, let me be honest. What happened in Hamas, or in the countryside of Hamas, I know the area and I used to serve in the army there. There are many villages or districts inside Syria, near the borders, inhabited by Lebanese people. Our former Minister of Defense, Ghazi Zaiter, is from there. And those people, the borders are very, very complicated there and not under control. I do remember we had hard time to forbid people to cross the border like this, easily between the trees and without any line.
All right, so the situation of a porous border. We're almost out of time. I just want to put one question to Pierre ROUSSELIN before we go, which is the situation you heard with the French foreign minister. A little bit later on this Monday, there's the U.S. presidential debates. The West is staying out of it. With what's happened last Friday and the ensuing violence, will that be all the more reason for the West to stay out of it?
Well, yes, because I don't know if the West will manage to stay out, but the issue at hand is the situation in Lebanon, and I think the France and the US and all the countries that are interested in what's going on are trying to stabilize the situation. They are supporting the government, which is not so obvious. I mean, this wasn't the case in 2005 when Rafiq Hariri was assassinated, definitely. But this time, the priority is to manage Lebanon, to keep Lebanon quiet the longest possible while the civil war is going on in Syria. And this is the reason why you see some support from the Western countries to a government which is not a national unity government, which is not the opposition, which we would support naturally, but we want to
try to keep a lid on it.
Keep the lid on it.
All right, Pierre ROUSSELIN, I want to thank you. I want to thank Elie Abdelhey. I want to thank Hicham Jaber and Javier Espinosa for joining us from Beirut, and Jonathan Spire for being with us from Jerusalem. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. All right, gentlemen.